we got to get GMAC up here to talk about the New York Knickerbockers. He's very sad, very disconcerted. And we have a super chat for Andrew here already. GMAC, what kind of wine should I gift you to drown your sorrows in? From Brian Garces. Shout out to Brian Garces.
Hold on real quick. It's GMAC. Brian, the Pistons lost in the playoff too. You didn't offer me any wine. This is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking.
Nothing for Bryce. Nothing at all. Brian, I'll take a red. I don't drink, so that's the thing. It's for my wife. It'll be a nice red. I think that's the type of wine she drinks. Fellas, it's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks. Been a while. How have you guys been? And anything new in your lives? Any non-life-altering, soul-crushing Game 1 collapses that you were live on playback for that you had to witness? And anything like that happen to you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've started a new preview series here. It's not like you've had to edit and figure all of those out scheduling wise while in the middle of a soul crushing playoff series.
The Blazers one was very concise, GMAC. It's
oh my gosh.
It's not like the Blazers one ended up being a full live recording episode.
I got to say,
speaking of which, by the way, the Blazers one is the longest one we've recorded so far. It's over 50 minutes. That comes out tomorrow.
Buckle up, folks. 53 minutes of do you or do you not believe in Tamani Kamara? Look, they've actually been welcome distractions. The Game Theory offseason previews, which everybody go check it out. We have a nice playlist on the Game Theory homepage, YouTube channel, if you want to check it out. Because look, I want to start here, and this seems to be a very unpopular opinion in Knicks land. And we'll break down the Knicks angle of this series and what the Pacers did. You guys did a good job of what the Pacers did that the Knicks didn't. So I'll say what the Knicks didn't from this angle, and we'll talk about that in a second. The Knicks made the conference finals for the first time in 25 years.
Yeah.
The entire conversation about this team for the majority of this year is who they can't beat. And they got to the conference finals by dethroning the defending champs. And if one person brings up Jason Tatum's injury, which was a tragedy, it happened when they were down 9 in the fourth quarter of Game 4. They were about to go down 3-1. Then the Knicks blew them out in Game 6. And those 4 days in New York City are some of the happiest 4 days I've ever had as a sports fan. And you see me wearing a Mets hat right now, right, fellas? I don't know if you guys know this. I like baseball. I like the New York Mets. I went to Mets versus Yankees the day after the Knicks clinched. The Knicks clinched. Wishing that into the future. The day after the Knicks beat the Celtics, I went to Mets against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. The Mets won, and I started high-fiving some Mets fans. But I was wearing a Knicks hat. And you know who else high-fived me? A Yankee fan. Because he was like, hey, we got the Knicks, though. Hell yeah. And loud Jalen Brunson chants started raining through Yankee Stadium as I was leaving. So as frustrating as this series ended up being, especially after Game 1, they cannot take away this team that has moments of unseriousness that we talked about, Bryce, all throughout the Pistons series. They were not able to completely erase the good vibes of this run and what those 4 days were, even though as we transition to talking about what they did in the conference finals, boy, did they try. Boy, did they try to erase all of it with how they played in this series, how they coached in this series, how all of it. But I will still leave this series, this playoffs altogether, with a positive outlook on what the Knicks did this season.
Yeah, like you might have Juan Soto, but I have Andrew Heaney. So who cares? You know what I mean? So it's fine. Right?
Yeah. Soto heating up. By the way, the only baseball note I'll say, Bryce, the Rockies are 9-50. 9-50. That's really bad.
It sounds like the
9-50.
Sounds like the 23-24 Pistons is what that sounds like.
It's worse. It's worse.
It's actually like genuinely worse. Yeah.
Like, I feel like if a team was, okay, you know what? They were 3-33 at one point. So actually that might actually be the 24 Pistons. But regardless.
Yeah, real bad.
Yeah, really bad.
Okay. So I think where I want to start this is I'm glad you gave that overall overarching view of positivity in terms of the city, because that's ultimately like we're going to talk about the future and we're going to talk about all this, and what they do moving forward. And it matters. It's important. But I do want to at least acknowledge how amazing it was to get the Chalamet vibes, center court or at the baseline in Indiana. Ben Stiller, just an icon, an absolute icon. Spike Lee, an absolute icon. Getting those guys back in our lives, making sure that the New York Knicks are great again on some level, right? I genuinely believe that basketball is better when the New York Knicks are great. The vibes at Madison Square Garden, the vibes of the overall NBA as a whole are better because Knicks fans, I love you to death. You're all crazy.
Yes.
And you're all insane. And you're insane in the best possible way. You care about this team so much. You so desperately want a winner that you cultivate this aura of excitement and enthusiasm for your organization that I think is genuinely just different than it is for other teams around the league. So it is really important to me that Andrew acknowledged at the top that the vibe of the city just shifted in such a way. I think the vibe of the NBA almost and the national conversation around the NBA shifted because of the Knicks. Where they go from here, we'll see. And now it's probably time to shift into the future. But I truly do love the New York Knicks and their fan base and everything that they do. I don't love James Dolan for many reasons, but outside of that situation, I think that this team, basketball is just better with them involved. So now moving forward.
Can I ask GMAC just one question real quick? You alluded to it. I think I know where your answer is, but in general, because I thought about this today, because I was you let me moonlight over at Knicks Film School, which I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate. I've had people reach out, bigger names in the space. They're hey, I like what you did over there, all of that. So you guys gave me a real opportunity to grow myself, my brand, whatever. I don't have a brand, but you know what I mean? But my thought was if you would have told me they were going to lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, give me nothing else, because here's the problem is I think it's because of who they lost to, but it's if nothing else, I'm you probably take that as a Knicks fan, right? Eastern Conference Finals game. So my question to you is, if I told you that preseason, would you have taken it? Would you have thought that was a successful season? And the Knicks fan base at large, if you gave them truth serum, take the emotions out of it, do you think they would have felt like that was a successful season?
Look at Bryce doing a journalism here. This is a good question.
It is great. It is a great question from Knicks Film School contributor Bryce Simon, who killed it with his film breakdown.
So here, real quick,
what's playoffs?
I was so sad when they would lose because the Knicks fan base is so crazy. They wouldn't watch the videos when they lost. I was this sucks. Because the first time it happened, I'm man, they must not like my videos. And then they won and I did a video and I'm oh, no. They just refuse. And we talked about it before we recorded. My favorite comment is a guy going, the ultimatum or whatever, you might be able to pull the actual quote is watching a Bryce Simon video breakdown or watching the Knicks blow the game one lead again. I was that's the best compliment I've ever got.
It was the overall dilemma because the video breakdown you did, it was let's revisit the last 3 minutes of game one.
In fairness, I showed in the first minute of the breakdown how they got the lead before they got rid of the lead.
So the dilemma of watching a Bryce Simon film breakdown versus watching this horror show again. To answer your question, Bryce, and it's funny because my dad actually asked me and asked the Knicks Film School, our faculty over there, would losing to the Pacers erased? He asked this, I think, Tuesday, so the day before the conference finals. Would losing to the Pacers erase this feeling that we have right now, that you all are clearly showing, that are expressing, and the vibe of beating Boston and what's going on in the city, would beating the Pacers erase that? And I said in that moment, absolutely not. Nothing will ever take away that Friday night beating Boston. I will say the how does matter. And it's why game one went a long way toward potentially erasing it. And then some of the different things and some of the frustrations that I had throughout the season, that a lot of us had throughout the season, rear their ugly head throughout this series. And it's why there are some Knicks fans that were like, I wish we had lost to Boston, because then they probably get a new head coach and maybe make wholesale changes, and the ups and downs and mood swings of a fan. It's short for fanatic for a reason. I personally am choosing to look at, to your point, where I thought this team would be before the season. And if you told me, I was doing I was having like a little Knicks film school meeting with somebody, and he looked up at one moment and said, the Knicks are 6 wins away from a title. Like, let's just think about this. The New York Knicks, where we were in the 2010s, where we were in the 2000s. And to your point, Sam, we are a James Dolan owned franchise, and we're 6 wins away from a title. That has to be like put to all the context. I know there are a lot of younger Knicks fans. You and all the lack of PTSD that you have. God bless you that you don't have any frustrations of watching Aaron Aflalo or Chris Duhon or Enes Kanter or literally anybody that you
shout out Jerome James, baby.
Right? Like the Channing Frys. Like, shout out to the picks that you thought that were the franchise changers that ended up going elsewhere and being contributors or just not panning out here. And they were
the Andrea Bargnani era is real.
Man, that just hurt. The Andrea Bargnani era is very, very, very stress inducing.
So do you remember that Eric Fisher was the head coach of the New York Knicks?
You know who lost out? Who he was the consolidation coach to? It was Steve Kerr. It was Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr chose either the Knicks or the Warriors, and he chose the Warriors because Phil Jackson wasn't willing to give him 5 years. So Phil Jackson,
guys, like there were years where they had Carmelo Anthony, where Langston Galloway was arguably the second best player on the team.
Yep. Shout out to Tony Douglas.
And shout out Langston Galloway. Fought his ass off for his career.
Yep.
Like
Bill
really
Walker,
worked hard.
Ronnie Turioff.
Yeah.
So that I think, Bryce, to your point, is like there is a divide in the generations of Knicks fans here, where there's the ones that are like, I'm going to be 37. I have a memory of what it was like toward the end of the 90s when they were really good and in the playoffs every year. And we rolled out of bed and they were in at least the second round. And then there's the entire century that they went through, where outside of 1 to 2 Carmelo Anthony led years, it's been dire. So we appreciate anything that we're happening right now. Then there's the younger Knicks fan that their first favorite Knick was Kristaps Porzingis, and their second favorite Knick was RJ Barrett. And the scars and the wounds of what they went through just don't apply. And so
these kids remember the Ron Baker era. Shout out,
right?
Legend.
They have no memory of Lance Thomas, or Willie Hernan Gomez, So that's where we are right now. The divide is clearly there, which is why it's fascinating to see what they do going forward from a rational standpoint, not listening to the Gen Z version of the fan base. But I do think they have some decisions to make. And look, do you want to you tell me where you want to go with this, Sam? I'm ready to have either conversation, the Cat conversation, the Brunson conversation, the Tom Thibodeau conversation. Which one do you want to have?
I don't think there's a Brunson conversation.
I was going to say, I will not partake in a Brunson conversation.
Oh, I don't want to either. Believe me. If
we're going there, I'm hitting mute and drinking my coffee because Brunson's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Look, like, as much as I dislike small guards in general, like as a team building strategy, I'm fine with having him is the guy. I do think there are overarching questions that they are going to have to figure out here in terms of their long-term build, and they probably have to answer them this summer. The first question to me is Mikal more than Towns, honestly, because I am sure that Mikal is expecting an extension of some sort. Like Towns, like you can figure out what you want to do with Towns. And obviously it's important in terms of like the team build that you have to figure out what you want to do with Towns. And we'll talk about this when we do I think we're recording the Knicks offseason preview tomorrow. It'll go up later this week. But I am curious to get your opinion on this, Andrew. Like the Mikal Bridges extension is 4 years, $156 million. Like that's the max. Is it? I would imagine he's going in, given that they just paid OG over 40 million. Mikal's probably going in expecting, hey, I want the full number. I mean, do you give this to him? Do you decide to move? Like, trying to figure out how you handle the Mikal situation is probably actually the most pressing thing to me, more so than the Towns decision, actually.
There's layers to it. I would say I saw the highs and the lows of Mikal Bridges all throughout the playoffs. He was brilliant in the Boston series, the master of the mid-range. I wish he would just take a layup if the layup's available. My guy, contact. I know the Iron Man streak exists. You're allowed to risk it every now and then because Andrew Nembhard is in front of you at the rim. And I didn't know fadeaway layups existed until I watched him play for my basketball team. Having said that, I think Jalen Brunson takes the extension early so that you have the flexibility to extend Mikal Bridges this offseason. I will say, and I'm not an insider, and I'm sure you've heard similar things, though, Sam, that they will consider options. These are also conversations that I was hearing about before the playoff run that they just had, and before he was so essential to beating Boston. And look, just to talk about his play in this series against the Pacers, hot and cold, his when he's hitting his mid-range shot, he's a very deadly weapon on offense. When he's not, you really need him to hit his threes. And when he's not doing that, he really needs to be defensively one of your best players. And when he's not that, then what are you doing? So, like, the up and down of the Pacers series hurts. I will say that unless you can find a significant upgrade, you've traded what you traded for him, that you should probably extend him. Like, it's just bad PR if you're like unsure to extend a guy that you traded your entire draft capital to your little brother across the river. So I think you kind of have to go all in with this core, which leads to other conversations. If you can get creative, if there's some big fish hunting that requires you trading Mikal Bridges to get something so you can get the other big fish in here, then fine. If that's not available, there's no like trade him so you can get 2 picks back and then you at least have some draft capital to go get some. No, like, there's a way this can still work. And they did just get to, again, 6 wins away from a title with Mikal Bridges, not having his best first year in New York. It could maybe even be a better second year. So I would say you extend him.
Is it the full number?
I would imagine he goes in demanding the full number, and he has the leverage too. Think? I mean, if there's wiggle room, Brock Aller will find it. OG took less. Josh Hart took less.
Jalen took less, obviously.
So Jalen took the max, but he took the max
number, but
early.
Took it early.
Right. So like I don't know if Mikal takes less. Maybe if his Villanova brethren, his CAA family can convince him to. I don't. I would assume he's going to take the full max, though. The OG precedent is fascinating that he took less than the full max than what he could have gotten, but I would assume he's getting the max at least.
I mean, for what it's worth noting that Mikal is not CAA. Mikal is Excel.
Really? I didn't know that. I thought Mikal was CAA.
No, Mikal's rep by Excel. So like slightly different. Honestly, I think makes it even like a little bit more complicated because if it's CAA, you can kind of keep it all in the family a little bit in terms of like, okay, if we're going to quietly shop him, like, let's do this quietly, right? With like a different agency being involved, it could be a little bit more complicated because if they find out, there will probably be hurt feelings. And that's if they decide to do that, which I don't know if they will yet. Look, I don't know what to do with Mikal. I think that number is very aggressive, honestly, for what we saw from Mikal Bridges this year. But they also don't really have another option. Like, they don't have another solution here to go and get somebody else. So, like, he still shot 50, 35, 81 and averaged like 18 points a game. And like, the defense is weird. Like, he is a really good wing defender now. It used to be that he was like this versatile, switchable defender. if he has to guard guards, which honestly, like the Knicks need a guy who can go out and be like their primary defender on lead guards and like offensive initiators. I don't think he does that well. Like he does not defend guards well. He does not get through screens well at this point in his career. And that's my biggest issue with him in general is if it's a wing like a Jason Tatum or somebody like that, he's actually better suited to guarding those players than he is the Halliburtons, the Cade Cunninghams, the guys like that. How does that adjust your team build? And can you work within that structure? I think you can work within that structure for what it's worth. Like, I actually think it's okay. I think he's gotten strong enough to where he can manage those bigger, more physical players reasonably well with his length. It's more, do you think OG can just take all of those assignments? And do you need to find a different fit defensively who can also provide what you need offensively?
So I just wanted to throw at you guys because, like, whenever I think Mikal Bridges trade, I think turn him into 3 rotation players, not turn him into a star. Like, when I look at the Knicks, I'm like, I wish they had more off the bench. I wish there was other options to go to. You know, like that was always my pushback with taking Josh Hart out of the starting lineup is like, okay, well, tell me who I should believe in. Like, I know Deuce was incredible a year ago. I don't think he had quite that magical run this season. I'm not saying you get I'm not saying like true, like just like role players, but I'm like, is there a world where Brunson's the dude? Let's say we still believe in Cat as the number 2. OG is your number 3, like just incredible offense, defense player. And then now we go get 2 more starters. We turn Bridges into 2 starters that space the floor so we can have 5 out. Now Hart is off the bench and then maybe another rotation piece of, you know what I'm saying? Like, is there a world where that's the move?
Yeah. I don't want to spoil anything for your offseason preview. So I do want to let you guys have the conversation with in depth, with the graphics, with everything when it's time. As far as how Mikal and his long-term fit here relates to how they played in this series, I think you saw it when Tibbs surprisingly went into his bench and turned campaign into Landry Shamet and DeLon Wright. And you got like a game and a half to 2 games of positive play. And then last night watching in game 6 and DeLon Wright can't hit an open shot and Landry Shamet is getting lost on defensive coverages. And Mikal Bridges actually played, I thought, a pretty good game 6 outside of the turnovers, which I'm not going to blame only him for their turnovers when everybody and their mother was turning over the ball last night. To your question, Bryce, about turning him into a rotation piece, they are already at 7 deep. I would love a 2 guard that sends, but like everybody would love a 2 guard that is like really good on defense and can shoot the ball. It's literally what everybody is looking for in the NBA. It's honestly the best argument for Deuce that he can be the point of attack defender that Josh Hart wasn't this year. And then you have Mikal and OG Anunoby as your wings, and they're just playing free safety and making it impossible to penetrate throughout the game. I'm assuming if Tom Thibodeau is back next year, which I think he will be, that he's not going to play 2 small guards because he never he's always going to pick the bigger player over the better player, which is why after Josh Hart fouled out in game 4, we got a Landry Shamet sub instead of Deuce McBride, which sent the entire Knicks verse into craziness. They're already at 7 deep is my point. So if you're adding 1 player with your tax MLE and then you need one of the rookies to pop, you know, so whether it's a Porty or a Tyler Kolek or a Dadier, you know, you got a lot. You got everything you could have wanted from a campaign minimum contract. Like, he helped you win 1 game in the playoffs against the Pistons. That's you already won, you know, by getting that from him, even though he ended up out of the rotation. That's really where I'm at. Is you talked about the coaching mismatch during your Pacer conversation. The fact that
we're going there next. Give me 1 second here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Weird trade idea that we'll get into more when we do off-season preview. Mikal Bridges for PJ Washington and Max Christie. Does that make the Knicks better?
Are the Knicks getting any draft capital in that? or is it just players?
Maybe something small. They can get a first rounder back or something. Won't be. It
I like
be
Max Christie.
Crazy.
Who's the coach?
I like Christie and I like PJ.
Who's the coach when you're making this trade?
It's Tibbs. I mean, I think Tibbs is there. Like it is.
Is Josh Hart coming off the bench? Is Max Christie coming off the bench?
I think Christie comes off the bench for sure.
Yeah,
is PJ Washington coming off the bench?
PJ starts at the
next question.
No, yeah. PJ starts, right?
I would start PJ and OG. Yeah.
What is Tibbs doing? Not what we're doing. What is Tibbs doing? Not what are we
with that core? He'll start Brunson, Towns, OG, probably PJ. I would guess he starts Hart and brings Christie and Deuce off the bench. Whether look, it was reported by James Edwards. Shout out the icon. James reported that Josh Hart said I am happy to come off of the bench. Now, will that be a real thing throughout the entirety of the season? I don't know the answer to that. But if you can start one of Deuce or Max and Josh is happy to come off the bench and be the best sixth man in the league or one of the 5-6 best sixth man in the league, that's interesting to me at that point.
It is to me too. I agree with you. He did send Josh Hart to the bench for a center. I don't think he's playing the smaller lineup that maximizes the offense.
Yeah, but it made sense, right? To play two bigs against a team that doesn't play up and down really fast.
My question would be,
defense isn't an issue.
My question would be, yes, I agree with you, but is PJ big enough and physical enough that he gets kind of the best of both worlds?
Maybe. I still think Josh Hart is, look, this whole season has devolved into a Josh Hart conversation where I agree with you, Bryce. If I didn't already own a Brunson jersey, if I were to buy a next Knicks jersey, it would be a Josh Hart jersey. The epitome of the heart of your team, quite literally, right? And he got overexposed. He is a 25 to 28 minute player, and they played him close to 40 the majority of the season. And it's because he speaks to the identity and philosophy of a Tom Thibodeau. The hard-nosed, high energy, 110% at every moment, strong rebounder from a guard position. And all that stuff's great in 25 to 30 minutes. And it doesn't maximize your team's highest ceiling when it's 35 to 40. And we saw it. Honestly, I thought they kind of killed the energy from him throughout the rest of the series when he suddenly became a bench player. It's very ineffective the last 3 games of the series. So it's why I ask you, if you're throwing me trade ideas, I have to not say what I would do. I have to try and think, how would the coach of the Knicks implement the roster as a result?
Yeah, I think my theory was that PJ might be big enough to where Tibbs gets the best of both worlds, was my theory.
Real quick, it broke my heart literally to have to call Josh Hart out for the backdoor he gave up in game 1. It literally ripped my heart out. And then now for the rest of my life, I will notice every time I watch a game and Josh Hart gets backdoored, and it happens way too much for somebody that I love as a player. And that's where it's he may be he's all the things you said, GMAC, and this, I defend Josh Hart to the brink. The defensive impact isn't that great. Whenever we talk about defense and this is what Tibbs wants and all of that, it's not that great, even though the rebounding is awesome. And I think he makes winning plays with some of that stuff. It is a real struggle there. You're right. You explained it perfectly in terms of the minutes he needs to play for a team.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The Tibbs conversation, which we haven't had yet, the Tibbs conversation is kind of easy to me. They just made the conference finals. They just beat the Celtics and we're up 3-1 with Tatum. I don't think you can fire him at the end of the day. I totally I have been as critical of Tibbs in the Indiana series as anybody you will find. I was very critical of Tibbs in the Detroit series as well. They made the fucking conference finals, guys. I think you have to keep him, and I think you have him on a short leash to start the year. That's what this is to me. If it seems hey, this was the ceiling of what we are, getting to the conference finals with Tibbs, and we have to move on early in the season, totally get it. Wash your hands of it and move on. But I think you got to give him a summer and see if this can get figured out in terms of the roster, because at the end of the day, I still think this is a flawed roster. It's kind of the reality here, and we're going to talk about that momentarily too.
Bryce, where are you on the Tibbs conversation?
So I kind of lean towards Sam as well, while also throwing out the caveat that I feel like we came on a lot of lives after Knicks games and disagreed with Tibbs' process. Even regardless of results, it was like, oh, they started the game better with the two big lineup. But all jokes aside, it makes no sense to me to go two bigs against the Indiana Pacers. And I mean, I have so many notes about not one, but two guys now that their idea is to get back to the paint first and then the mat, and all of that. And so in between, because I don't have the words to support him other than they just made the conference finals. And as somebody that is kind of prides himself on being process driven and not results driven, I don't like that being my main argument for him staying, even though I understand why it is an argument for him staying.
He's an enigma to try and evaluate, because to the majority of people that may stand for Tibbs, their argument is usually scoreboard. Like, look where you are, where you were for the last two decades, and they've progressed every year of the Brunson era. They won 2 games in the second round against the Heat. They won 3 games in the second round against the Pacers the next year. They made it to the conference finals the next year with him at the helm. Like, everybody keeps saying he can't take you to the next level, and they keep going to the next level. And then there's all the process stuff that I acknowledge and I feel, and I think it's okay to say he had a very rough conference finals against the Pacers. Yeah. But if his job was in jeopardy, he saved it by the job he did against the Celtics, especially those first 2 games.
Let me ask. So, Sam, we both think Rick Carlisle is a top 5, if not top 3 coach in the NBA. So I guess my thought here is, how many guys weren't going to get outcoached by Rick Carlisle in the conference finals, and how many of those guys? Now, the argument may not be getting out coached by Rick Carlisle. It's like, how many guys wouldn't have got out coached that badly by Rick Carlisle, but how many of those guys are available that aren't just going to get, like, because that's the thing. It's not just firing Tibbs. The other part of the equation is who steps in there. And then now this guy, does he fit this roster and all of that as well?
Can I ask you guys, do you think Atkinson got out coached by Carlisle?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, like, while Bryce was talking, actually,
because
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think it was nearly to the extent that Tibbs did, but I think the answer is yes. Yeah.
Okay, because that is a name that gets brought up a lot in the Knicks world, that we could have had Coach Atkinson if you fired Tibbs a year ago. Or
that's interesting.
So, like, the Kenny Atkinson argument, that one of Kenny Atkinson's assistant coaches, Johnny Bryant, used to be with the Knicks as the assistant coach. Now, I'm going off of what I've been told and my understanding of how the Knicks operate. The idea that the Knicks' offensive identity disappeared when Johnny Bryant left couldn't be farther from the truth, because Tibbs is like the one that calls the plays, and then his assistants are the humans that talk to the other humans, because he doesn't know how to talk to humans. It's like, all right, you go be the people persons to our players. I will, like, spend overnight watching film at Tarrytown, New York. Having said that, like, the offensive creativity and the flowers that got thrown at the Cavs is deserved. And then I go back to scoreboard. Like, Tibbs' team made it further in the playoffs this year. So I understand both arguments. It's why I land where Sam is, that I would welcome a change if the Knicks decided to just be like, no, we think we should have won this series and you lost it, and we're going to now make an effort to be more creative. And more specifically, creativity, I think, is a tough word to use with Tibbs, because no, he's not creative, but he's effective. The flexibility that's required this late in the playoffs. And, like, he's obviously a good coach. Anybody that calls him a bad coach is just like, you're telling on yourself about your intelligence level. But as far as, like, his flaws and his rigidity and his stubbornness and his lack of being able to be flexible, those flaws are magnified the later into the playoffs that you go.
Correct.
Which is why a Rick Carlisle that's getting positive contributions on his roster from a Ben Shepherd and a Tony Bradley and a Jarris Walker and a Thomas Bryant, like, we're going to 13, 14 guys before Tibbs played a 9th person in this series. And that is the difference in philosophies, that you spent all year playing this mediocre starting five, changed it with 3 games left in the season, apparently, or 4 games left in the season, because Josh Hart finally told you to. And it didn't even work because you played the wrong one. Like, you didn't do the one that actually matched up with the Pacers the best. So it's why my fairest evaluation is you had a rough conference finals, and I would welcome a new head coach, but they also got to the conference finals for the first time in 25 years under your leadership.
Correct.
And I think you deserve at least another transaction cycle if they were to give it to you.
The last point here I want to get to is this roster just like inexorably flawed with Towns and Brunson?
Yeah.
Is the combo, right? Maybe that's what we'll save for the offseason preview, is just like, is this thing flawed in terms of the build itself? It's hard to move one of those two coming off the seasons that they did. I think they just made the conference finals. They're both all NBA players. Like, they have both been really, really terrific. I do wonder if it limits your ceiling a little bit, because the deeper you get into the playoffs, it is harder and harder to be able to mitigate the concerns that those two have defensively when they're on the court together. And I don't know what to make of that yet. I'm still trying to navigate it in my head. Maybe it is a different coach, right? Like, maybe that is what it takes. It takes a different coach to be able to come in and figure out a way to, run a defensive scheme that isn't coming to my head immediately, but I'm not as smart as most NBA coaches. Like, maybe there is one that you could figure out with all of these wings and with, a trade for depth in some other way, shape, or form, or whatever you do. It's an important conversation, the Brunson Towns thing.
No, this one is hard for me because I hate my analysis to be like, this team that just lost in the Eastern Conference Finals is still going to, like, what is, if they didn't make a move, and obviously we don't know the entire landscape of the offseason, they are the what favorite team in the East entering next year?
Top 3.
Second.
I was going to say probably. Second, right?
Yeah.
Second or third. Cleveland, Indiana, New York, right?
It's those 3. Yeah.
It's going to be those 3. Yeah. It's like, so to me, it's a little bit like you put yourself in a position with a roster of guys that are under 30 right now to give yourself a chance every single year. Like, to me, that's not an awful strategy to say that for 6 straight years until these guys really get into their mid 30s, and you probably have them all under contract until then, other than Hart, I think, depending on what you do with his contract. This is a team that is good enough every single one of those years to go compete, especially apparently if you don't hit the Pacers, right? Or maybe you figure out how to overcome the mighty Pacers. But it's like, part of me is like, sign me up. You're telling me I have a team that for 6 years is going to be a top 3 potential Eastern Conference team? Sign me up. And I'll bet on one of those years we quote unquote hit luck. And we talked about luck earlier in the podcast. It's not the way people, I'm not saying luck in that way, but Josh Hart gets hot from 3, or Bridges gets hot from 3, or Cat has a great defensive series, or if it is the Pacers that are their kryptonite, they don't match up with the Pacers, whatever it is, and you go get one. It's hard for me to turn that down and potentially trade an all NBA player and have no idea what the return is going to be and how that's all going to mesh together.
So, Sam, you and I, after the Cavs were eliminated by the Pacers, we had a conversation about the 2 small guards and whether that blueprint wasn't worth building around, or do you have to shake it up? And you don't want to step on the offseason preview, but I put out how my philosophy is when evaluating any team's playoff run. And it's that all playoff runs are created differently. Like, how many Nuggets conversations were had when they were losing in the first round? Do you wait on Jamal Murray to get healthy? And are they wasting Jokic's prime? And do you need a new coach in Mike Malone? And then it broke right the one year because the matchups broke right. one year for them. Where honestly, the team that gave them the biggest struggles that postseason was the first round against the Timberwolves, who then eliminated them the following season.
And then everyone's down this year on Denver, and they're going to give Oklahoma City certainly the biggest problems in the Western Conference.
Right. So I don't like, I'm with you, Bryce, in that like the Knicks will still be considered a top 3 team going into next season. There are other teams that could show up out of nowhere. Maybe Detroit takes a leap. I'm just going to say the word Philadelphia, and then we can all decide what we all think could happen with Philadelphia. Who knows what happens with Milwaukee? But like, there's a world where the Knicks, because the Bucks and Pacers, correct me if I'm wrong, were a game apart in the standings, right?
Yeah.
So there was a world that also the Knicks and Pacers were a game apart in the standings. So like the path could have been different where the Pacers maybe get knocked off earlier because they're playing a different team.
Yeah. Or like Tyrese Halliburton's back acts up.
Right. So
and like there's
the Celtics run last year where they go through the playoffs and it's a Heat team without Jimmy Butler and a Cavs team that loses Mitchell after 2 games and a Pacer team that isn't the Knicks, who were like peaking and were built, and then had all their injuries popped up. But then Halliburton goes down after 2 games. And then they're playing not the Nuggets and not the Thunder in the finals. They're playing a Mavericks team who is very good, but they were able to shut down the 5 seed in the Western Conference instead.
Yeah.
And so like the every playoff run is different, and you want to
do you think Oklahoma City went into the playoffs thinking that they're going to get Indiana in the finals?
Exactly. Like they're this whole season about 60-win teams and like what OKC against Boston. Are we ready for it? And they get Indiana instead. So that's where I would evaluate the Knicks, to your point, Bryce, with if you think you can get to this point again with the current roster, with the current landscape of the East, then there's no blow it up button. There's tweaking. There's reloading.
Yes. I'm not saying like run it back. My other thing, like, I don't think this is going to happen. We'll get into it. What if the Pacers go and win the NBA Finals? Like, you lost. Not only were you 6 games away, you lost to the NBA champions.
Yeah.
It's like you really blow it up because you had to play the NBA champs and you blew game 1. Who knows how much different that series goes if that disastrous fourth quarter, last final, 3 minutes and overtime doesn't happen. Well, you know what I mean? I mean, it did.
2 minutes and 55 seconds to be exact. Yeah. When they're up 14. Yeah. Sorry.
It did happen. Well, they're also down 8 with 40 seconds. Like all but sorry. But you know what I mean? Like it did happen. It's part of the equation, but it's just like how you can make an argument they were real freaking close, Sam.
And they were really close coming off of having acquired Karl Anthony Towns in October.
Sure.
They did not have any time to like get this thing together in the offseason.
Right.
And certainly the Pacers acquired Pascal Siakam at midseason last year, and they were quite solid in the playoffs. Like they're quite good. They made the Eastern Conference Finals last year, certainly. Is there a chance that like the increased continuity of having Towns and having these guys having played together for another year helps increase that chance as well?
So I realized I didn't even answer your question, Sam, about like the build of Brunson and Towns together. And like maybe my point is more like maybe next year they don't play a team that specifically like hammers that weakness over and over again. And with the way that the Pacers create that disadvantage with both of them on the floor. By game 2, it was very obvious they can't share the floor together, and they're your 2 best offensive players. I will say that my takeaway from most of this season was that there's a very weird fit with both of them. We talked about this during the Pacers series. Their crunch time offense just being cat go space the floor was for me unacceptable. And it's why Brunson won Clutch Player of the Year, because he was just like Josh Hart pick and roll and please make tough shots. And he made a ton of them. But it's why people were wondering if a new head coach that's maybe more creative or plays more 5-out lineups and boosts the offense a bit would make more sense. And it's why going forward, I'm curious what they do to add to the roster and the margin moves. Do they need to go get another starter so Josh Hart goes back to the bench to be more impactful and make those lineups and that tandem more sustainable? I will just say, this is the last thing I'll say on this. there is something to what the Pacers did, not specifically team building wise, but their path to the finals. They get to the conference finals for the first time since 2014, last season. They lose in 4 to the Celtics, blowing game 1. Like, let's remember how the Pacers lost game 1 last year. 2 turnovers in the last 45 seconds when they had a 2-possession lead, that Jaylen Brown 3 in the corner, and then they lose in overtime. And then they have fourth quarter leads at home in game 3 and 4 with 1 minute left, and they blow both of those games. That learning experience, that hunger coming back the next season, and then the path opens up for you. What happens to the Cavs? You're on this run where you haven't lost back-to-back games since early March. The Knicks hand you game 1 in this series in the way that they did, and you were opportunistic in stealing the first 2. Like, there is something to you learn from when you don't win. And I wonder if this is a learning opportunity for the Knicks to come back with the same core and retool and go get it. So I'm open to that timeline playing out. Having said that, to your point about how close they were to the Pacers, Bryce, I will be thinking about game 1 for the foreseeable future until this team makes a finals, because that was tough. Guys, they were up 8 with 36 seconds left, and like the probability charts, the stats of like 994 and 0 when teams are up 14 with 2.5 left. Yeah, it's the worst loss in Knicks history, and unless this core makes it to a finals, we will be thinking about that game 1 for the foreseeable future. That's my opinion, by the way. I know when you guys reacted to it that you have. What was it, game 7 of the finals, Sam, that you have as higher than that one?
Yeah, that was my theory. It's just if you're in game 7 of a finals and you lose, it's real tough.
There's still a banner that gets hung in Madison Square Garden for conference champs. And like, there is some kind of respect to losing to Hakeem. Like, you lose game 7 on the road of a series you weren't, like, you lost to a Hall of Famer that won the MVP that year. You were favored to win this series, and you were riding the energy of what you just did to Boston, and that disappeared for the rest of the playoffs. Like, the vibes of the city, we were just all on pins and needles. Guys, they were up by 18 with 2 minutes left in game 5, and I'm sweating. Like, are they going to do it again? Like, is Carlisle going to put somebody in that's going to make 7 threes all of a sudden? So, like, all of the momentum that they had disappeared, and the series completely shifted after that. So that's why the outlook of a potential trip to the finals changed after that game, which is why I would rank it higher.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, GMAC.
Oh, is GMAC leaving? Is he leaving? Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Completely random topic. I want you both to answer off the top of your head. Sam, Chris texted me this the other night, and he asked me to ask you guys this question. When you think of Ty Lue, what's the first thing you think of Ty Lue?
Champ.
Okay.
What did you say?
When you think of what do you think is the thing?
No, what did Andrew say?
Oh,
champion.
What's the first thing you will think of when you think of Ty?
Definitely the Allen Iverson step over.
Okay, so this is okay. GMAC, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 36. Gonna be 37. I remember the step over. I'm just
okay. Interesting.
I'm thinking of him as I thought of him as a potential Tibbs replacement.
Okay, so Sam, that was my answer as well, and that's Chris's answer as well. And Chris's point was, like, where is the cutoff? That's why I think it's interesting that wasn't yours, GMAC, because I think most people in our age range would think of that also. And then so I wonder, where's the age of people who don't even really realize that clip and only think of him as either a coach or you know what I mean? Like, it was an interesting question. I'm not trying to throw shade at Ty Lue. Like, it's an iconic. It's a
really good question.
Yeah, he's an incredible coach, but.
Yeah, it speaks to the point that Andrew was making earlier about Knicks fandom in terms of like the youth of, people that haven't gone through the sadness before. So it kind of brings this around in a really interesting full circle way.
I'll also qualify it. A Knicks content creator that's been thinking about who could potentially replace Tibbs for the past 5 months is not the person to ask. When the Knicks won game 1 against Boston, we had a watch party in New York City. And I spent the entire first half, as Boston's building their 20-point lead, trying to tell people there that Tibbs is not our Mark Jackson, that he's much better than that. He's much more qualified than that, has accomplished. He's accomplished more than that. And the comp that you want to go to is going from Doc Rivers to Ty Lue, if you could. A good coach to another good coach that might be younger and more creative. It's why, like, Ty Lue to me has been the name that if the Clippers ever were to let him go, that's the guy I would love for the Knicks to go after. Obviously, if you said, what about Ty Lue as a player, I would think about, I was 13 years old and one of the biggest Allen Iverson fans in 2001. So I would absolutely think of that step over. It's ironic that I was such a huge AI fan as a kid, and now I can't stand the city of Philadelphia. Funny how that happens.
I find it ironic that Allen Iverson is my favorite player of all time, and we play nothing alike. That's what I tell people all the time. Like, take Allen Iverson's game, and that's my favorite player of all time. That's who I looked up to. And then imagine the complete opposite way of playing basketball, and that's who I was as a player. So
shooting sleeve? Shooting sleeve?
No, I wasn't allowed to wear extra gear. My dad is very old school. So
gotcha.
That's what makes basketball like so great, though.
It truly is, Sam.
It's like such an inclusive like environment where everybody is, on equal pegging on the court, until you get proven to be better or worse than somebody, obviously. But like, it just brings all of those cultures together in so many different ways and such an interesting melting pot.
Me and Chris are living in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, the smallest podunk town you can imagine. And we are just looking up to and living through Allen Iverson as like our favorite player. And it's like, probably couldn't have grown up any differently, us and Allen Iverson, all the way across the country and all of that. And he's just like this dynamic athlete. And we're, but I thought it was a fun question. Like when we said, because my immediate answer was the AI step over. And again, no disrespect to Ty Lue, but it's just like, it truly is an iconic moment in my mind that I will always remember. So I wanted to ask.
All right, GMAC, we're getting you out of here. Shout out to you. Shout out to Knicks Film School. Go tell the people about it, please, before you leave.
Find Knicks Film School on YouTube. We just hit 30,000 subs during the conference finals. So we thank you to the Knicks for giving us the playoff run to ride the coattails of, and hopefully we continue to do that throughout a very busy off season. So look for Knicks Film School on YouTube, on the podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We will have wall-to-wall coverage of the off season, our newsletter on Substack, our Patreon. And I will just say one thing before I go, as you guys are about to preview the finals. So two things. One, congratulations to the Indiana Pacers and to Caitlin Cooper and to my buddies over at the Setting the Pace podcast. It's really cool that people in this industry that I respect, Scott Agnes, your newsletter I get every day, even though I hate read it throughout this conference finals. So bravo to the brilliant people that will now get to cover the NBA finals. I wish you nothing but success in your coverage. And last but not least, go Thunder.